Oh, hello, hello, Coach PBJ here. Just wanted to come on and just share a little bit about how I got to the space that I'm in right now. So, my title today is From Tragedy to Triumph. So, I was just having a conversation, and what I've discovered about my life is sometimes I'm just being. Sometimes I'm not even focused or alert. I'm just kind of going through being what I'm supposed to be in the space that I'm in. So, hmm, May is a very interesting month for me. I'm doing much better, but it has always been a very challenging month for me. Not always, should I say, but since 2006, 18 years ago. Wow. Hard to believe it's been 18 years. Wow. But 18 years ago, I found myself on today, May 21st, having to make a decision that I was not prepared to make. So just backing up just a little bit. Mother's Day weekend, 2006. My first husband, Robert, and I went on a marriage retreat. And it was something that we really, really, really need. Because we were really at that point where we were trying to decide, is this even worth it? And so this was our last pitch to figure this thing called marriage out. And when I tell you, it wasn't even called a marriage retreat, it was called a marriage advanced. And the first night that we got there on Friday, it was just filled with, they were talking about the foundation of a marriage. That's what Friday was about. And then the rest of the weekend, it was nothing. It was all assignments, all things, suggestions that we can do to get back to that space of where we first started, of 20 years before, because we were married for 20 years by this time. And so we had an amazing weekend. We worked through a whole lot of differences. We left the retreat in a so much better space than when we had started. Ooh, I didn't think this was going to be hard. Here we go. So what had happened was we got back from the retreat. It was Mother's Day the next day, and I had decided to go visit my grandma and spend some time with my grandmother and my mom. And my husband, Robert, wasn't feeling well. He said he didn't want to go. So I went on my own, came back home. He was still laying down, wasn't feeling well. We went to bed. Next day, he got us to work as usual. I went to work as usual, came home, and for whatever reason, my allergies started acting up. So I took some Benadryl and went to lay down. Robert started working out in the yard. And so then he came upstairs where I was laying down, and he thanked me for the retreat. And he said it was the best thing that I could have done for our marriage. And so he went back downstairs. That particular night, my daughter was taking acting lessons, and so she wasn't home. And she had to be picked up around 9:30, 10. And like clockwork, I always picked her up. So I jumped up and went to go get her. But my husband stopped me. Robert stopped me, and he said, mm-mm. And he turned around and he looked at my 17-year-old son, and he said, Trey, go get your sister. You have a car now. Your mom shouldn't have to leave the house to go get your sister when you can go get her. He said, I want you to start doing it from now on. Trey said, okay. And he went and got Regina. So I sat down and I said, you okay? and he told me that his back was hurting really, really bad. And so when Sheena came home, he got her to walk on her back, and he said that relieved the pressure. Long story short, later on that night, the pain got intensely worse. So I took him to the emergency room. We took him to DeKalb Medical, and they said that his pressure was extremely high. The top number was in the threes, the bottom number was in the twos, and the nurse said, "You are a dead man walking." That was her choice of words. So they had to take him by ambulance to another hospital. They took him to Piedmont, downtown Atlanta. So when we got there, they ran all this test, and then they came to tell me that Robert had suffered a tear in his major artery because of how high his blood pressure had gotten. And so it ended up being a tear from right below his shoulder blade all the way down, and it stopped right before it hit his kidney. And so the doctor explained to me that the only thing that kept him alive is because, other than having high blood pressure, to all you men out here who's playing with that, was the fact that he was healthy. He was otherwise healthy, a very healthy man. But only time would tell, and that they needed to regulate that pressure. They gave him something to drop the pressure, and it dropped the pressure extremely fast, and Robert went to sleep. And then the doctor said they would determine on the next day if they would be able to go in and repair that tear. Unfortunately, the meds that they gave him to lower his blood pressure sent the rest of his organ haywire. His kidney failed, and he went into a coma. Yeah. I think this is really the first time I really talked about this in this much detail in a long, long time. So bear with me, but I really want to help somebody. Okay. So when I came back to visit him the next morning, he was still asleep. But as it turned out, he was not asleep. He was in a coma. And he never came out. And so that was on or about the let me see, it was 17. I'm getting my days right. That was like the 18th or 19th. Yeah, about the 18th and the 19th of May. Okay. So like I said earlier, his kidney had also failed. So on the 21st of May, the doctor came to talk to me, and they said, "Listen, his kidney has failed. We need to put him on dialysis." Now, mind you, while we're in the hospital, May 17th, a cousin had died moments after getting dialysis. So here this doctor is asking me to make a decision for my husband about something that in my mind had just killed my cousin. One of the hardest decisions I had to make. Told the doctor, "I can't make it. You're going to have to wake him up so we can talk about this, so I can know what it is that he wanted to do." Long story short, they didn't have no choice. The need for the dialysis started to show up in his skin color, and we talked about it with the rest of the family, and we put him on dialysis. May 27th, the fight was over. He couldn't do it anymore, and he transitioned. Yeah. And so that was probably by far the hardest thing I have ever experienced in my life. Number one, having to make a decision that we hadn't talked about. I learned from that experience that death knows no age. So I don't care if you 15, 16, 17, however old you are, if you're grown, if you're 18, 19, and you're married, you have a family, have those conversations, because we just don't know. So anyway, now here I am, May 27, 2026, and I find myself instantly a widow with a 17-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had so many thoughts going through my head. Thoughts of defeat, thoughts of failure, thoughts of fear, angry with God, angry with the doctor. Oh my God, and that nurse. Man, if I could have gotten my hands on that nurse that was caring for him the day that he died, oh, I would be in jail today because she was so freaking insensitive. And if I could have got my hands around her neck, I probably would have strangled her because that's how insensitive she was. When Robert transitioned, she didn't wait to see where I was. This thing literally called me and said, "Hey, Miss Burge, I'm sorry. Your husband started having some heart problems. He didn't make it. He's gone. I'm sorry." On the freaking phone. Didn't wait to see where I was, but that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. I had a woosah moment there. I wanted to go back. But anyway. Whew. So anyway, long story short, I had a whole lot going on in my mind. I did not know how to handle, I didn't know how my children felt. Because you see, at that moment, I still had my mom, I still had my dad. So I didn't know what they felt. So everything, the grief, it immediately turned to my kids. And I didn't have my own grief. I was grieving for them because I didn't know how it felt to not have a parent. And to me, that was just the most horrific thing for a child. And here my kids were now faced with having to grow up and become a young man and a young woman. And all kind of thoughts went through our mind. So I had to focus my energy on them. And so everything I did in those moments was with Trey and Rashina in mind. I had to make sure that they were okay. And I was determined that every dream, everything that Robert and I had talked about wanting for our kids, it was going to still happen. Didn't matter if I was just one parent now. Didn't matter if my household income had just went from 2 incomes to 1. Didn't matter. Failure for them, failure for me, it just was not an option. So my whole purpose began to focus on them. And I had so many negative thoughts. And those are the things I call shadows: fear, anger, regret, all of these things that was shadows, with the shadows that was growing. I didn't have time to deal with those in those moments. I had to suppress those emotions because I had to focus my energy on my kids. And then to top it off, so I decided that year that I was going to take the whole summer off with my children. I did, took the whole summer off with them. When they went back to school, I decided to go back to work. When I got back to work, my supervisor called me into his office, Mr. Mebane, and he said to me he had done work in psychology. And based on his knowledge and his experience, that being married for 20 years and the stress of the job was not a good match. So he had decided he was going to move me out of my position and put me in some bubblegum job. I know he thought he was helping, but he didn't. So I was angry again. Didn't have time to be angry because I got kids. They were my big why at that point. I didn't have time to deal with all of those emotions. I had to focus. So what I did, I said, "Mr. Mayvane, I came back to work too soon." I left and I got in the car and I had a little talk with Jesus. I said to the Lord, "Listen, you saw this day coming. You knew it even before the foundation of the world. And I said, I don't know what you're going to do about this, but I'm not going back to the job. And I got 2 kids to take care of, and I got to go. You done took my husband. I need to know what we going to do." And at that very moment, my phone rang. And in April of that year, right before my husband died, I had interviewed for another position. And it was a promotion. He tried to demote me. God was ready to promote me. And so the guy called, it was Kim Williamson, and I answered the phone and he says, "Hey, you remember you interviewed with us for a position in April? And I heard right after we was getting ready to make our decision that your husband had passed away. Well, we selected you for that job and I'm still holding it for you. And I just needed to know, when do you plan to come back to work?" Now, I just had this whole negative experience with my old boss. And then here come a future new boss with some good news. And I said, Mr. Williams, can you just give me 2 weeks? Let me just process myself. Let me get myself together. He did, started my new job, and the rest was history. I'm sharing all of that because that is this time in my life when I began to really pay attention to my thoughts, to my mindset. That's when I said I really started to suppress a lot of the things that I was feeling. All of this stuff began to be bottled up inside of me, right? And now I'm learning how to deal with it. Here I am 18 years later and really learning that some of the stuff that I have been experiencing since 2010, because that's when my daughter went back to college. Sheena went to college in 2010. I came back home to an empty house, and that's when I really started to grieve because it wasn't supposed to be like that. I wasn't supposed to, my empty nester wasn't supposed to be that empty. It was supposed to be me and Robert. And so, you have your plans, but God, He knows the plans, right? He has for you. And so that moment, I began to breathe. And that's when I think the whole anger and the fear and all of these things began to really, really come out. And so I started to face some of my fears. And one of the things I shared before is that I got on the plane for the first time. I was 40 years old. I had never been on a plane. So I started facing a lot of my fears, but it was still so many things that was so ingrained in me that I did not even know was there. And here I am, full force doing this shadow work. And now I'm starting to understand my shadows and how they got there, how the anger got there, how the fear got there. And so how the self-doubt got there. And I don't even know why I have the self-doubt because, well, I do, because I was so active in church right there. And to think the way I prayed for people and the way I laid hands on people back then and saw that people got healed, got saved and recovered and didn't work for myself, self-doubt. So when it went to me, so that's a whole nother story. But I wanted to just share that is how my mindset makeover actually began. Because during that time, whenever a thought of self-defeat or whatever came into my mind, I would have to rethink that thought. I would have to cast down those thoughts. 2 Corinthians 10, 3-5. The weapons of the warfare are not carnal, they are mighty to the pulling down the stronghold and bringing into obedience every thought and high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God. So when thoughts of defeat came, I cast it down. When fear came, I cast it down. I suppressed it, or whatever you want to say, but I cast it down. I couldn't deal with that in the moment. And when I thought that I was failing my kids, I had to think a new thought, because the Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So I couldn't think failing. I had to think victory. And even I started getting some grief counseling because it was a lot. And I went to this counseling. It was a group counseling, a bunch of widows in there. And when I heard this lady said she lost her husband 20 years ago and she still get up every morning wanting to commit suicide, I'm like, wait, what? 20 years? Are you serious? Another lady, I think the person who, I was the youngest one, the one as far as number of years my husband had passed, had just passed that same year. But later 5 years talking about how she had started drinking, a later 10 years. And I'm like, wait a minute now, that will not be my story. And I'm like, is that the best y'all have? And that's when Romans 12:2 became my best friend. It says, be not conformed to the ways of the world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. That will not be my story. I'm going to renew my mind. At the end of the day, this is not happening to me. It is happening for me. I know that there's some good, even in death. That's what I kept telling myself. And now here I am, 18 years later. And by the grace of God, I've started another chapter of my life. Been married now. This year will be 10 years to Tony Jackson. We both was going through some very, very dark times in our life at the time we met. But God has brought us through those challenges. And we are doing the work, the mindset shift work. And when I tell you, this has been an amazing journey. So no matter what you are going through in life, you have the power to use this to change your situation. Both of my children went to school. My son went to Toccoa Falls. He's in ministry. He's even gotten his master. I want to say he got 2 masters. My daughter went on to SCAD in Savannah, and she's working. She lives in Las Vegas doing film and television. They are both living their best life. Trey's now married with a daughter. And my biggest fear when Robert passed is my kids had every excuse to go out there and do some crazy stuff. Because unlike a lot of fathers, Robert was there. He was a surrogate father for most of their friends. And so the anger behind that he would be taken, it was so much. But we had to keep recycling our thoughts. We had to keep suppressing thoughts that did not serve us well. We had to do mindset shifts. We had to do mindset makeover. We had to totally change the way we were looking at that situation. And I do believe that because we decide to make over our mind in the way we were looking at it, because we decided to look for the good even in that situation, that's why our lives are shaping, because we're still every day, it's an ongoing process, that we are becoming better versions of ourselves each and every day, that we are making over our thoughts, that we're in a good space. We did not look at that death as an end all be all. We looked at it as part of the journey to getting us to where we're supposed to be today. As much as we loved Robert, it wasn't part of the plan for today. And we're okay with that. We know he's in a better place anyway. So I just wanted to share that that's why I am so passionate about the thoughts and the things that we allow to stay in our mind, because I am a living witness that you get to create the life that you desire in spite of what you've been through. Your story is just that, your story. Use it as fuel. Use it. Look for the good in it. Do not have a always me a victim mentality. I could have fallen into a victim mindset, but I wasn't a victim. I was a victor. I turned my tragedy into triumph. I learned more about myself than I ever thought I would. I learned that I was a woman of strength. I learned that I was a woman of determination. I learned that I was a woman of purpose. And I learned that Philippians 4:13 is the truth. I can do all things through Christ who strengthened me. I learned that Mark 11 chapter, when he says, speak to your mountains and say, be thou removed, you shall have whatever you say. So I start paying attention to the words I allow to come out of my mouth, because they have power. The power of life and death, or death and life, depending on the version that you read, is in your tongue. So use your words wisely. Pay attention to your thoughts. And if your thoughts are not serving you well, if your thoughts does not produce love, joy, peace, happiness, self-control, think another thought. You can create the life that you desire and you deserve. And it starts right here. So if you are continuing to have self-defeating thoughts, DM me, reach out to me. Let's start working on your mindset. I'm telling you, that is my life purpose. I know it is, to help us change the way we see things. Because when we change the way we look at things, the way we see things change. When we change the way we think about things, our thoughts begin to change. So this has been Coach PBJ. Someone asked me about my journey and how I got to this space. So I thought I would just come on and just share it with you. Hope that you guys have been blessed by what I've shared. If you are looking for a life coach who knows what struggles are, who knows that sometimes life will deal your hand that you wasn't ready, you weren't expecting to. If you are ready to live your best life, if you're ready to move from defeat to victory, let's get on this. Let's do it. I got you. Coach PBJ. See you soon. Bye-bye.